Good day. Today we're going to talk about rebuilding the foot control. Basically, the foot control we're going to be rebuilding is a DCI foot control, which has a universal application for ADEC, Maris, Pelton Crane, etc. DCI. Most equipment, this foot control will fit universally. This is a widely used foot control in the industry. It's called the disc style foot control. ADEC invented it in the early 70s. It is a great foot control, good basic foot control. It is totally pneumatic, not electric, so your air lines and your air pressures are very, very, very important. Today we're going to rebuild it, go over the rebuilding, some protocols of rebuilding, some reasons for rebuilding, the proper way to rebuild, and some indications to rebuild. Every foot control has to exhaust. If the foot control doesn't exhaust, the water spray on the unit will stay on, and as well as the handpiece will keep turning. The burr will keep turning in the handpiece as the doctor's removing it from the patient's mouth, and that's not good. The burr turning as the doctor takes it out of the patient's mouth could actually cause gingival damage, cut the patient, any number of things. So the foot control function is real important. Foot controls are usually out of sight, out of mind, because people operate them with their feet. And usually they don't know they're going bad until it's too late. One of the symptoms is sticking water spray on a handpiece. Another one is the burr continuing to turn, as I stated earlier. Let's take a second and look at one that's performing properly. Okay? We're going to take our handpiece out of our hanger, make sure that the unit master is on. For illustration purposes in the video, I'm holding the foot control in my lap, which is the way you should hold it unless you want to climb down on the floor. It's no problem either which way. But for our purposes and for the camera, we're doing it at lap level and we're doing it on top of the chair. Notice how we have the chair upholstery protected. You need to protect the chair upholstery anytime you do this, or anything that you're going to lay on the upholstery. You don't want to have to pay for upholstery. Okay. Now let's see this one functioning good. With a depress on the foot control, we get good drive air, we get water spray simultaneously. We don't hear any air leaking out of the foot control. We shouldn't hear any air leaking out of the foot control whatsoever. The foot control should potentiate the speed, vary the speed which it's doing, just like an accelerator on an automobile. When we let off the foot control suddenly and abruptly, we should hear an exhaust and the burr should stop. There we go. Perfect. Burr stopped, timely, the whole 9 yards. One of the symptoms of rebuilding, like I said, is the burr going to start turning, or either air continually leaking or hissing out of the foot control when the foot control is being used or when it's not being used. Okay? Also, the foot control controls the chip air or the air spray that atomizes the water spray, as well as the water spray. If you'll look on our toggle switch, we're going to put the switch toward the blue icon on the foot control, which means water spray on. Beautiful water spray, beautiful atomization. Can everybody see that? Now, the exhaust on the foot control, when we let off of it, when we're using water spray, we should get drive air stop in conjunction with water spray. And here we go. Very good. Very good. Okay? Now, let's get into some disassembly and reassembly of the foot control. First and foremost, on any foot control, you turn the unit master off. If the unit master does not turn the air off on the unit, get down on the floor and turn the valve, the air valve off. You cannot have air pressure on this unit while you're doing it. It will blow the parts to the corner of the room and possibly injure you or put your eye out. It's clearly stated on the back of the foot control, warning, disconnect air input before servicing. Failure to follow will eject the stem. Okay? Before you go to rebuild the foot control, We're going to turn the master off and exhaust the air out. Now, you would think it would exhaust out quicker, but it's not, because we have a water bottle in this unit. The water bottle is pressurized by air. You've got to be patient and drain every bit of the air out of it. Our burr is slowing down. We can also hit the air syringe simultaneously. And get every bit of the air out. Ladies and gentlemen, before you go to rebuild the foot control, please make sure you have a foot control kit. There are two types of kits available. There's a kit for a foot control 1 and a kit for a foot control 2. As the years progress, we're seeing less and less foot control 1s. So today we are concentrating on foot control 2. Having bled our air out to a safe degree, we've got our parts lined up over here. We have our Phillips screwdrivers. Basically, the tools you need for this are a Phillips screwdriver and an Allen wrench, your Allen key set. We're going to take the screws, the peripheral screws out. 1, 2, 3, 4. On some foot controls, you'll see 5 screws. But they rebuild the same. Takes a second to pop these screws out. In the meantime, I still hear a little air hissing through the master switch, so I'm killing the air. You cannot be too safe with this. There may be some parts you'll have to reuse. There may be some parts that you will have to reuse, and you certainly don't want them blowing all over the place. And there we are. Now we'll finish taking our peripheral screws out. Guys, always be careful when you're disassembling, because disassembling is a good guide to reassembly. So kind of remember and take note of your things as you're disassembling, okay? Now, we've got all our peripheral screws out. We've set our screws in a safe location so we can retain them. Being careful, lift the disc off. Leave your internal plastic part on the disc inside the foot control. A lot of people make the mistake of taking this out. There's no need to take it out, guys. Make sure it's thoroughly retained. It'll flex before it breaks inside the foot control with the plastic notches lining up on your metal flanges. You'll see foam on the inside of the disc. That foam is to dampen the exhaust sound when you let off the foot control. The foam's not necessary. You'll see it deteriorated in various symptoms and situations. Don't worry about it if it is. Just clean it up. We're going to take a little bit of lubricant on the top of the dome, the foot control disc, like that. A little bit of O-ring lubricant and give it a good smear, okay? And we'll set that aside. Guys, I've stated in earlier videos, get some O-ring lube. This O-ring lube is very important because you can't use lithium grease or Vaseline on an O-ring. An O-ring is made of rubber. Rubber's made of petroleum. Certain synthetic rubbers are made of petroleum. And Vaseline is petroleum jelly, and grease is a petroleum derivative, lithium grease. It will dry out the O-rings and cause premature O-ring wear. So use your O-ring lube, okay? We're going to set our disc aside, and we're going to pull our main poppet and stem out, and spring and disc, like so, in one assembly. Leave them assembled, guys. The less you take apart, the less you have to reassemble, and the quicker you'll be out of that office. Okay? Now we'll set it aside. Inside the dome, this has exposed the foot control block to where we can service it. Before we take the base off the foot control, we are going to service our air relay or the water relay, one or the other. You can call it either one. This is responsible for routing the air. This is responsible for routing the air when the switch is turned on to your clippered valve or your water valve to signal the water to come on in conjunction with the drive air. There's many, many, many little small parts in here which we're going to go over. Again, before you try this aspect of it, have the DCI part number 6165 foot control repair kit. To thoroughly repair this foot control, you will need two foot control kits, a 6161 and a 6165 DCI. This is pretty much universal for all these disc style foot controls, especially where there's a water switch present. Always keep you a towel with you. First, we take off these end screws after we're sure that the air pressure's bled down. I know I feel like I'm beating a horse, but it's very, very, very important, ladies and gentlemen. These screws are easily lost. New screws do not come in the new foot control kit either, by the way, guys. So we'll set these over here. Now, we've got our block unretained. You can take a screwdriver and lightly tap it and it will separate. How about that? Okay. We have a disc and we have a diaphragm. We're going to set the diaphragm aside. Taking a pair of needle nose pliers, you'll see one hex barb fitting in the back. A hex plug, okay? Unscrew your hex plug like so. Be careful, be careful. Do not be ham-handed. Be gentle like you're a watchmaker, okay? We'll set our plug aside. Now, inside here we have a little bitty spring. And this spring may be too small to show up on the camera. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. And let me tell you, if you lose it, there's a new spring in the new foot control kit. For our purposes, we're going to reuse the foot control kit. Now, I've given you the options of replacing. Guys, always replace the foot control kit in the field. All that cleaning and everything's great, but there is no substitute for a replacement. I'm not doing it to sell parts for you. I'm doing it to ensure that you don't have a recall on that same problem. Okay? We've got our spring and our barb out, which constitutes a relay. We take a little pronged instrument, any kind of instrument. We reach inside the port where the barb plug came out, and we push our poppet out. Very gentle. And here's our poppet and O-ring assembly. Very, very similar to what's used in an ADEX Century block, ladies and gentlemen. Very similar. What you'll get is a new stem with O-rings already pressed on it. So you don't have to worry about repressing the O-rings or anything, just the stem. So what we do on the rebuild procedure, on the replacement procedure on this end of the foot control, is a little bit of O-ring grease, just a small amount. The smaller the O-ring, the smaller the amount of grease. We don't want to inhibit the freedom of movement of the poppet and the O-rings. We're going to give a light coat of grease to our valve poppets. We're going to reinsert the valve poppet, like so, on the back. We'll take our barb plug with our new spring. As you can tell, if you can see in this, the spring fits perfectly inside the barb plug housing. It makes it really easy for install. Okay? On the opposite side of the poppet, we're going to hold the poppet in with our finger. We're going to screw the barb block back in to the same side, and we're going to tighten it down. We're not going to romp down on it, guys. We're not putting lug nuts on a tire. Just a nice little cursory tightening will do. Now, the diaphragm is being replaced. Let me give you a hint about replacing these diaphragms and O-ring lube. This O-ring lube is very good for these diaphragms. Very, very good. They keep them resilient, they keep them pliable, but the best feature is, I'm sure you've all replaced diaphragms and had the problem with them not retaining while you're replacing them and punching holes through it with the screws that actually sandwich the diaphragm. This O-ring lube actually makes the diaphragm stay and retain where you put it, which is really great. It cuts so much of your time down trying to line things up. It is pitiful. Now, what we're going to do before we put the screws back in is we're going to put a little lube on the screws. Why are we doing that? In engineering, you never use two like metals in the same surface. They've used two like metals here. This will make the screws easier to install as well as easier to take out the next time you take them out. So we're going to start one screw. I'm going to get it started, a couple of threads. There we go. Then we're going to start the adjacent screw so we can be sure that everything's lined up properly and we're not going to penetrate our diaphragm. Guys, be patient. Like I said, this can be like watchmaking, but this is a very, very common problem. This is probably your second or third most common operatory problem that you're going to deal with. So we have replaced our diaphragm and our water relay, part of the foot control. That's finished. Now we have to replace the drive components, which are very simple. You turn the foot control over. Inside the foot control, you'll see two Allens. 1, 2. Easy enough. We'll get our Allens, our Allen heads, and we're going to remove these screws. Guys, it's very important when you're using this O-ring lube, it's a silicone base. Don't wipe your eyes. Don't touch any mucous membranes. It will burn you. It'll sting, it won't burn. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that it'll burn. You wish it would have burned you because it'll sting you so bad, okay? Now we're going to set our bracketing screws over in the dome. Very carefully. Now, we turn the foot control back over like so. This exposes our service port on the foot control. As you will see, we have an O-ring right here. This O-ring will come in the service kit, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to set it aside. Now, from the top, we're going to push down with our instrument and push our poppets and our O-rings out. Now guys, always pay attention to the way the poppet comes. There's a poppet right there. Then there's an O-ring If you lay them out the way that they're disassembled, it's easy to reinstall them. Also, your new foot control kit has an instruction guide in it that shows you where the stagger is, how to stagger these. We have another poppet coming out, which comprises 2 poppets and another O-ring. There should be an O-ring in here, and here it is. Another O-ring. Laid out the way that they are to be reassembled. Now, we're going to take a Q-tip and go in through the top, actually clean the valve port, the cylinder in it. And we're going to clean from the bottom as well. Don't be afraid to flex this thing around. Clean all your surfaces very good, including the surface where the block mounts back, like so. And do a nice wipe down on the foot control, guys. Remember, this ridge right here is exposed in the operatory. The doctor can see this. So wipe it down and clean it up a little bit before you put it back together. Give them a little value added, okay? And you will see some nastiness in here because, once again, it's operated by people's feet. Now it's time to reassemble it. We'll put it through the bottom. We push in 1 O-ring, okay? A poppet as so. Another O-ring. And then another poppet. And we depress them firmly. As you see, they will flush out. They will flush out with the bottom platform of the block. It will be flush. Now we take our block O-ring. We're going to put a little bit of lube on it for lube purposes and retention purposes. Remember, retention purposes with this O-ring and this grease, the O-ring lube, will make it stay where it is put. See? It's a great aid, and that's a great hint. You line your foot control block back up with your holes. They'll be diagonal. We take our block screws, drop one in the hole. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're prepped for this thoroughly, have your tools lined up, have your foot control kits ready, you will have no problem with this. You can breeze through this. This is a very basic thing. We're not going to tighten the one down that we put in. We're using it as a guide for right now to install the other one diagonally. And we'll give that one a good, nice little snugging. Like I said, guys, ain't no need to romp down on it. And we'll give this one a nice little snugging. And that is satisfactory. Now, we've exposed the top of the foot control. Again, while you're here and while you have the disc out, check this. Check to see if your tubings feel spongy and resilient the way they should be. If they're hard, or hard like pasta, like raw pasta, while you've got it apart, go to the doctor or one of the staff members and say, this foot control tubing is fixing to blow, which it will. And go ahead and replace the tubing on it while you're at it. I'm not even going to go over how to replace the tubing. It's basic. We all know how to replace tubings. Try to stock some foot control tubing because you'll need it. Foot control loop tubing looks similar to handpiece tubing, but it's very different. It looks like it. Foot control tubing is a lot heavier. Handpiece tubing is meant to carry only dynamic air with an outlet, the outlet being the handpiece. So the tubing's not pressurized. This tubing is continually pressurized with whatever pressure the gauge and the regulators are reading on the unit, which could be up to 80 psi. So that's why it's important that you use good, heavy foot control tubing. Okay? Now, we're going to put our spring, poppet, and disc back on. Now, this is an important part of this. We're going to lubricate the poppet or the piston. And we're not going to overlube it, guys. If you overlube it, it won't send the signal. But if you underlube it, it will stick and do all kind of craziness. So we've got a nice coat of lube on it. Push it back through the disc and the spring assembly this way. Put it back into the port. Check up and down thoroughly for freedom of movement. I always do that to get some grease on the O-rings that we put in. Then I always hit it again with a light smear. Without over-grouping it, okay? Now, unfortunately, you cannot test for air leaks at this stage of the game because the disc has to be put back on for safety reasons. I'm going to show you what happens. Well, I would, but it's even too dangerous to illustrate. If you have air pressure on, this disc will fly out. This poppet will fly out and probably put your eye out or land in the heat register and you'll never find it again. Now, we're ready to put the disc back on, but first let's take a note of some things. We have two ridges right here. They look like two buttresses. The tubing route must be contained within these buttresses, which they are, like so. Okay? Now, the notch on our disc that we've previously looked at must align with these buttresses and these tubings. What we do first, can everybody see thoroughly? What we do first is line up our notch on these tubings and plant the disc, just like that. Then we take one of our Phillips screws and put it into the closest screw hole that's available. Okay, we've got one in. Now, we're going to depress the other sides of the disc, manipulate it around until we line up. And we've lined up on this one. We're going to put another screw in. You have to literally squeeze the foot control together while you're doing this, guys. Like I'm doing. Next screw. Nice and tight. You're screwing in the plastic, guys, so like I said, there's really no reason to romp down. Again, let me preach about a cordless screwdriver being such a help here and helping you get through with the procedure. Now, we can turn our outer valve back on and we can repressurize the system and check for leaks. Turning our main air valve back on in the junction box. Very slowly, very slowly. Now, we'll turn our master back on the unit. Let the water bottle pressurize. Let the hissing go down. Listen for air leaks. I don't hear any. With every handpiece or tubing thoroughly in the automatic valve on the delivery system, we're going to check the foot control. Nice exhaust stagger. You hear that? The foot control should do that. Like I said, that exhaust is exhausting, so when the doctor lets off the foot control, the burr stops and the water stops. Very important. Now, our next step is Pick up the handpiece, give it a go. Back cap coming off. Give it a go. Potentiate at all speeds, guys. You'll also hear a foot control called a rheostat, R-H-E-O-S-T-A-T. Same thing, potato, potato. We're running at a very, very, very low speed, just enough to get the burr. This shows the tactility of the foot control and the potentiation again. We'll kick it up a little bit of a notch. Try it like there's an eggshell under the accelerator and you don't want to break the eggshell. We're kicking it on up. We're going to kick it on up, kick it on up, floorboard it. Now, all of a sudden, very good, very good. The burr stopped. If the burr keeps running after you've done a rebuild, it's because you've rebuilt the handpiece so well. That handpiece should have some freedom of spin in it as well, which shows that the handpiece is rebuilt properly and that the foot control is rebuilt properly. Next step is to kick the water switch on. And ensure that we have water spray. And we are fine. Now, in the event a lot of your service calls for the foot control is going to be your water switch broke off. These water switches are very durable, guys, as you can see. See me bend it? But however, after 3 or 4 years of a doctor dancing on top of it and stomping on it and everything, they break off. These foot control switches you should keep in stock. I think they're only, what, $5 to $6 a piece for the toggle. Your cost. There's no excuse not to keep them in stock, guys, okay? Absolutely no excuse. To replace, it's very simple, ladies and gentlemen. They will either have an O-ring right here, retaining them in, or either looks like a slip ring connector, which is otherwise like a key ring type of affair. So you can take your instrument and slip down in here, walk around the periphery with it, and it'll come off. Just like that. There's your retainer ring. Like I said, it's just like a key ring. Okay? We're going to set it aside. We're going to punch the axle out, the retention axle. Taking care to remember the orientation, which way your valve came out. It came out to the left of the foot control. Inspect the bottom of your cam. That's a cam right there. See how it's notched and cut out? Any smoothness or any non-definition of this ridge means it's not activating the foot control switch. So replace it. When you do replace it, take a little bit of lube, just a small amount. No reason to go crazy. Just a small amount and put on it. Reinsert your switch like this. Make sure you've got up and down motion, and we do. Take your axle. This can be quite problematic sometimes, but it just takes a little patience. Take your axle and insert in one side through the hole. Just like this. Just like that. Now, while you manipulate the switch, push the axle all the way through until it's equilibrated on both sides. Just like that. You should be able to look at the switch. The top of the switch should look relatively level with the switch platform here. That lets you know that it's in correctly. Okay? After that, we take our retainer, our key ring. Now guys, if you lose the key ring or if the key ring's broken, like I said, you can take an O-ring out of your O-ring kit, which is what ADEC used for many years, and use this to retain this axle. This axle must be retained. If one side of it comes out, you won't activate the water. We're going to force our ring back on. Sometimes you can do it with your nails, sometimes you have to use a tool. I was able to do it with my nails. Now, we're good to go. We're going to check drive air one more time. Water spray one more time. Drive air again. Give it a couple of kicks. From all angles. All angles, because the doctor strikes it at all angles. A common misconception about foot controls is that the doctor stomps straight down on it. He doesn't. He hits it from the edge. That's where it's important. Hit all your periphery, make sure everything bounces back, everything exhausts, just like it's doing, guys, okay? Then have a little pride in your work. Take your paper towel or your rag and wipe it down again, get all your fingerprints off of it. Wipe the tubing up a little ways. Wipe your switch off. Put it back down on the floor for the doctor. Now, don't just lay this foot control down on this side. On the exit and entry, patient exit and entry side of the chair. That's dangerous. That patient could trip over that tubing, and it'll be your fault. Allow enough tubing to go around the back of the chair. The doctor, if he's right-handed, uses his right foot, just like he does to accelerate his car. Safety first. Route that tubing around that side so the patient cannot trip over it. And all that being said, that concludes the rebuild of the foot control. Very simple. As usual, if you have any questions or parts questions, call me or Paul. We'll be more than happy to help you out on it. This is a very basic job. Remember, before you even go, have your foot control kits, have your O-ring lube, and have your tools laid out, guys, okay? Thank you very much for your attendance. I hope this enlightened a few things for you guys. Again, if you have any problems, call me or Paul. Have a good day. Thank you very much.